everyone, and welcome to the channel. If this is your first time visiting, my name's Alan, and this channel is dedicated to all things nature and photography. That said, I probably won't be out doing any nature photography for the next few days because my state has been sweltering in the middle of a massive heat dome, and we've been pushing 100+ degree weather every single day. So for the most part, I've been staying inside, staying cool, and longing for the nice days and afternoons when I could go out and do a little bird photography. I have come out for a few minutes though to check out my bird feeders and my bird bath and make sure that all of my birds in the area are fed and watered, because they really do need a lot of water right now in this heat. But while I'm out here, I thought I could take a few minutes and talk to you a little bit about Nikon's recent announcement of the Z6iii. I actually wasn't going to release a video about this at all. I don't plan on getting the camera, and I'll explain why in a few minutes. But I had actually several of you reach out and ask me for my thoughts on it, and I was really flattered that after all of those wonderful release videos by some really tenured YouTubers, that some of you still wanted to know what I thought. So today we're just going to be two friends out in the yard, getting some errands taken care of, getting some yard work done, and chatting all things camera. I think starting with some of the things that I really like about the Z6iii, so let's get to it. And just to be completely clear, this is not a review of the Z6iii. My channel isn't big enough for me to get early access to the camera or anything like that, so I haven't used it, and all of my thoughts are based purely on the specs from Nikon's announcement this week. So if you're looking for a hands-on review or example images, there are more than a dozen really good YouTubers that have already made that video, so I would point you in that direction instead. This video is purely just my thoughts. So, like many of you, when I started hearing rumors that Nikon was going to put out a Z6iii, I got really excited. And I think in part that has something to do with my long history with Nikon's 24 megapixel cameras, going all the way back to the DSLR days with the D700 series. I know the D750 was an incredibly popular DSLR, sold really well, and even to this day, a lot of people still have theirs and use them regularly. My first entry into that whole lineup was actually the D780, which was a really interesting hybrid camera that was still technically a DSLR, but if you put it into live view, it was a mirrorless camera and matched the sensor and specs of Nikon's Z6 series. And coming from the D7200 and firmly holding on to wanting to stay with DSLRs, I thought that the D780 would serve as a really nice compromise. But what I ended up finding was that I was in love with that 24 megapixel sensor, that full frame look, and more as I was using the camera, I found myself loving using the live view and the mirrorless capabilities of the camera, until finally I relented, I capitulated, and I said, I'm just gonna get a mirrorless camera. So I bought the Z6 II, and it was my camera when I first started birding. I have taken some of my favorite photos with it, and it is one of my favorite cameras of all time. And I was really heartbroken when I sold it, but it was bittersweet because I replaced it with the Nikon ZF, which has the same 24 megapixel sensor powered by a new image rendering system, the XPEED 7, which is the same one in the Z8 and the Z9. And it did something magical that took that 24 megapixel sensor to the next level. There's some magic in these images. So all of that's to say, I've had a long history with 24 megapixel cameras in the Nikon lineup, and I've loved all of them, and I've been really happy with them. So that meant that a Z6iii would have big shoes to fill, and I was excited for what Nikon would come up with. And I think they've done a really excellent job. This is another entry in the 24 megapixel sensor series, although Nikon has said they have built a brand new 24 megapixel sensor, and they've done something interesting with it. It is partially stacked, meaning that the camera can push 20 frames per second and shoot in RAW, but at a fast enough readout that you can turn off the mechanical shutter and minimize rolling shutter, which is really interesting for birds in flight. I really struggled with the Z6 II with the mechanical shutter because that shutter blackout caused me, especially with birds in flight, to miss a lot of shots. As soon as the shutter would close, the bird would move on, and I'd have to recompose and try to find the bird again, and those precious seconds wasted meant I didn't get the shots I wanted. I was in love with the Z8 and the Z9 because there's absolutely no shutter blackout, and that means I can keep my eye on the prize the whole time I'm shooting a bird in flight. So with the Z6 III being able to overcome that hurdle, I think it's a big win for that lineup. Number 2, I am pleased that just like with the ZF, they have implemented 3D tracking, and they're using this new subject detection system that they built for the Z8 and Z9 and included in the ZF. I think that's going to be a big improvement because one of the largest complaints about the Z6 II that I always heard was that the autofocus wasn't great, especially when it came to tracking. So Nikon has vastly improved the readout speed and added the ability for an electronic only shutter blackout free shooting experience. They've also vastly improved the autofocus, and they've even added a fully articulating flippy screen, which I know isn't for everyone, but for YouTube scrubs like me that like to record video, it's a wonderful thing. So it seems that Nikon has addressed every complaint that I heard and felt myself about the Z6 II. So what's not to love? And honestly, I can't think of much. I think the camera is going to be a fantastic option for a lot of folks. And that's what I want to talk about next. Who is this camera for? I said at the top of the video, I'm probably not going to buy it. But let me explain why. I'm not going to get this camera because while I love the 24 megapixel sensor, something happened when I was trying out a Z7 II that I couldn't quite get away from. And I used a 45 megapixel sensor, that same 45 megapixel sensor that's also in Z9 that I have. And I like that extra resolution. I like it for what I need when I'm shooting, but I know that it's not for everybody. So what's going to keep me from getting this camera isn't that there's anything necessarily wrong with the camera. It seems like a great camera. The specs seem fantastic. What's going to keep me from getting the camera is I'm already filling the 24 megapixel niche with my ZF, which I think is a wonderful everyday carry-around camera, and I think for that purpose, the camera's enough. But as I'm thinking about potentially an additional body for birds and wildlife, the Z6 III release has actually convinced me that next year, I might go ahead and add a Z8 to my Z9 so that I've got 2 equivalent cameras attached to 2 different lenses. They'll serve all of my bird and wildlife needs, and then I've got the ZF for video. Super happy with it, don't see a need to upgrade, and I can also use it for my everyday carry around. So what I'm trying to say is it just doesn't fit the needs of my lineup. On the other hand, it is a great camera, it seems, and I would love to play with it and test it out and give you some additional thoughts. But I think that's where my head is. I'm really excited that Nikon keeps innovating. If that is worth anything to you at all as you are shopping around and watching these videos and thinking about buying one, I hope that helps you to make a decision. I think it really does come down to, do you like 24 megapixels? Does that work for your workflow? Or do you want more? Do you want 45 megapixels, and do you need that for your workflow? If the answer is, I need 45, go with the Z8 or the Z9. But if 24 megapixels is enough for your needs, it certainly seems like the Z6 III is going to be a powerhouse that will work really well for you and save you a couple $1,000s. So, okay, so it was a little hot out there in the heat dome and I was getting pretty scatterbrained. So just to tie these thoughts up in a bow, with the Z6 III, it seems that Nikon has taken all of the good from their long history of 24 megapixel cameras, including the ZF, improved upon the formula, and put forward an excellent mid-tier camera that's an excellent value for what it does. Photographers that shoot in low light will enjoy the reduced noise made possible by the sensor. YouTubers will enjoy all of the video options as well as the articulating screen. I also forgot to mention that Nikon seems to have solved all of the overheating problems that absolutely plagued video on the Z6 II. Bird and wildlife photographers are going to appreciate the improved autofocus and the 3D tracking, as well as that higher blackout free burst speed that's made possible by the new partially stacked sensor. The brighter EVF seems like it's going to be helpful on bright and sunny days as well. If 24 megapixels is enough resolution for you, I'd say that it is most likely worth picking this camera up or at least considering it. If on the other hand, you prefer shooting with 45 megapixels for your workflow, I'd say pass on this one and do what I'm doing. Look at the Z8 instead. I've rambled on enough. I'm going to get inside and cool off. Thank you for watching, and don't forget, subscribe, hit like, all of those YouTube things if you want to help this channel grow. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.